Hello and welcome to Roundabout-A-Story. My name's Rosie and I've written a story for you today called Magnificent Dolores. I hope you enjoy. One day, Dolores, the pony, woke up with a pain between her eyebrows, right in the middle of her forehead. It was so sore she couldn't even open her eyes at first, but eventually she managed and made her way out of her paddock and into the field for her morning graze. She passed Penelope the pig and said, "Good morning, Penelope." She passed Gareth the goat and said, "Good morning, Gareth." She passed Crystal the cow and said, "Good morning, Crystal." Not one of them said good morning to Dolores, but instead all of them stifled giggles and looked at her with raised eyebrows. Dolores felt very confused. "What's so funny?" she asked, her forehead still pounding. "Well, little pony," giggled Penelope the pig, "I think you've got something on your head." "It's rather unsightly," added Gareth the goat. "It looks like one of the chickens has laid an egg on your head," exclaimed Crystal the cow. And with that they all howled with laughter. Totally baffled, Dolores trotted her way down to the pond. Surely a big drink of water would help her sore head. She had just started drinking when her friend Leopold the toad appeared on the other side of the pond. "Hello, Dolores," shouted Leopold. "How are you this morning?" Dolores told her friend how she had a nasty headache and wasn't feeling herself, and on top of that she'd been laughed at by Penelope, Gareth and Crystal. "They told me it looks like a chicken has laid an egg on my head," exclaimed Dolores. "Let's take a look," said Leopold, skipping his way across the lily pads to Dolores. "Ah, yes, I see. It looks like you've had a nasty bump to the head. Don't worry, that bump will go down in the next couple of days." "But I look so silly with a big bump between my eyebrows," said Dolores, now able to see her reflection in the water's surface. "Well, I know what we can do about that," said Leopold, who then set about gathering some reeds and flowers. Within moments he had made his friend a beautiful garland full of bluebells and daisies to sit on her head, hiding the unsightly bump. "You look lovely," cried Leopold, happy for his friend and also pleased with his own creative talents. Dolores had to agree. She did look lovely, and after thanking her friend, she strutted her way back to the field to graze. When she returned, Penelope the pig, Gareth the goat, and Crystal the cow were together gossiping, as usual. "Oh, hi, Dolores. Enjoying your morning exercise? Cracking morning for it," Penelope the pig said with a sly smile. "And such excellent headwear, Dolores," added Gareth the goat, gesturing to the garland on Dolores' head. "Oh, Gareth, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's exquisite, Dolores," laughed Crystal the cow. Dolores said nothing. She just looked down at her hooves. "What's wrong, Dolores?" asked Penelope. "Can't take a yoke?" And with that, the pig, the goat and the cow all set about laughing again. Dolores suddenly felt so small. She no longer felt she looked lovely with Leopold's garland on her head, but in fact just a bit silly. She felt her cheeks start to burn and her eyes brim with tears, and she bolted away from the group. She found herself back at the pond, looking down at her reflection. She shook the garland off her head. It fell into the water and floated away. Dolores stared at the bump on her head, trying to get a better look. To her dismay, it looked like it was getting bigger. "Oh no," whispered Dolores. She turned away from the ugly bump and then caught a glimpse of her body on the water's surface. Another egg-like bump had emerged on one side of her back, just past her shoulder. It looked exactly the same as the one on her head. "Oh, no, no, no," uttered Dolores. She span around, inspecting her body in the water's surface, and to her dismay, she saw yet another bump on the other side of her body. "Oh, no, 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 no," cried Dolores, and with that she laid down and sobbed. It wasn't long before she heard a soothing voice. "Dolores, don't cry, I'm here. What's happened?" It was Leopold, with one webbed hand on his friend's snout, the other holding the garland he had made for her. "I was downstream when I saw this floating on the water, so I followed the stream back this way to find you," explained the kind toad. Dolores told Leopold what had happened in the field with Penelope, Gareth and Crystal, and that she'd just discovered another 2 egg-like bumps on her back. "I just don't understand what's going on. I was fine yesterday, and now I have 3 bumps that look like eggs, and everyone's laughing at me, and my head hurts so much," she cried. "What's going on?" And at that moment, there was a searing pain in between her eyebrows and between her shoulders, and she heard Leopold gasp, but she couldn't see him because she had shut her eyes tight trying to stop the pain. With her eyes shut, Dolores couldn't see what was going on, but she suddenly felt like she was expanding, growing bigger and wider, taking up more space. She could hear the wind in her ears and she could feel it in her mane. And then all was calm. "Dolores, look into the water," uttered a flabbergasted Leopold. "Why would I want to do that?" said Dolores. "Because you'll be amazed by what you see," said Leopold. Dolores tentatively walked back to the water's edge and peered in. She really was amazed by what she saw. The same eyes, the same snout and ears, but now, in exactly the same place the bump had been, her face was adorned by an elegant horn. "Whoa!" she exclaimed. "Leopold, look!" And as she turned round to get her friend's attention, she saw something else that had not been there before. A pair of wings on her back, where the other 2 bumps had been. "Dolores," came Leopold's voice, "you're a unicorn! When were you going to tell me that?" Well, Dolores had never known she was a unicorn. With that thought, she began to laugh, and she flapped her incredible wings. She could fly. "Come on, Leopold," shouted Dolores. "Jump on my back and let's take to the sky." Leopold jumped up, holding on to his friend's mane as she flapped her huge, wonderful wings, and they began to rise up into the air. They went up and up and up, and the farm got smaller and smaller and smaller. Penelope, Gareth and Crystal became tiny little dots in the sea of green fields beneath them. They flew across the fields of the countryside, spotting sheep that looked like grains of rice in the big green fields below. They flew across the small towns where the evening sunlight was casting long shadows of the houses. As the sun was setting, they flew above the city, where beneath them all the lights from the buildings were flickering on as the sky turned a deep blue, bespeckled with its own bright lights. "Look, Leopold, we're surrounded by stars," exclaimed Dolores. "It's beautiful," said Leopold, now clinging on tightly to his friend's horn, determined not to let his fear of heights detract from this magical adventure. Dolores kept beating her wings, and they flew across deep valleys and huge hills until they reached the shimmering sea. Dolores dived down so that her hooves skimmed the surface of the sea as she flew. She felt magnificent. They eventually landed up on a mountain overlooking the sea, and they sat together watching the sunrise. Dolores felt so happy watching the world wake up, seeing the sky in technicolor with her best friend beside her, who was actually now fast asleep and snoring very loudly. "We've been up all night," Dolores exclaimed aloud, waking the sleeping toad. "Good morning, Dolores. How are you today?" yawned the kind toad. Dolores smiled. "I'm much better now, thanks, Leopold," she said. "Shall we go home?" And with that, Leopold jumped up onto his friend's back, and they soared across the sky. They travelled back over the sea, breathing in the salty air, back over the city where they could see trains that looked like caterpillars moving about beneath them. back over the towns where they could see busy school playgrounds and dogs out in parks enjoying their morning walks. Eventually, the farm came into sight. Dolores and Leopold landed back in the field where Penelope the pig, Gareth the goat, and Crystal the cow had congregated for their morning gossip. The three of them looked on in amazement when they heard and felt the gust of wind from Dolores beating her huge wings as she descended to the ground. "Wow!" the three of them uttered in awe. "Dolores," whispered Penelope, "aren't you beautiful?" "Dazzling," said Gareth. "Awesome," added Crystal. "Magnificent," thought Leopold.